Okay, um, what I'd like to do, now, is talk about ABC state more formally. Okay, so I'm going to do a reasonable amount of reading, and some of the bullet points are put up here. I don't do presentations very well. In fact, I hate it even with students to do presentations through PowerPoint and so on and so forth. I'm more interested in social engagement, so I'm interested in the live thinking that goes on, not information being sent to the students. So I find this a bit challenging, so I apologise if this doesn't come across that well. But if you could potentially do a little bit more on your side, hopefully I will inevitably disrupt this procedure. Okay. And that's what my classes were. And A classes are like that. It's less power in the teacher teaching, and more power in the learners. The teacher becomes a learning facilitator. That's the whole point of it. ABC is it takes the role, the role which is challenging for a teacher, which is discipline implementer to learning facilitator. And that combined role as a teacher, ABC differentiates. Okay, and the differentiation is created by the students. Okay, so it's not a matter of a teacher saying, "Oh, I want to just be a learning facilitator." Okay, fine, but you're going to have to deal with kids that are actually not playing ball. Okay, and you cannot let the whole class collapse because some students don't play ball, and that's why a lot of teachers, vocational teachers that want to learn to teach, they go in, start learning to teach, and then they find that actually it doesn't quite suit them because they're nice people basically, and they don't really want to impose certain kinds of disorder, and if they certain forms of institutional order, and even if they do, they might do it in a very cold way. And some teachers manage to stabilize that, so they're sensitive, lovely human beings, and they impose a very controlled, cold environment. So they don't really smile that much, but they do at least know that they're helping students. Whereas I would like these gentle human beings to be appreciated as gentle human beings by other human beings. Some of them are a bit more harsh than others, but they recognize that if, because their nature is a bit more gruff, they cause disruption, we can't see that aspect. The teacher, but we can't even see that aspect of other people around us that are gentle, more caring, and so on and so forth. Okay? And that's the objective here. Okay? The state creates institutional behaviour of the teacher. The teacher should and has to accept. So even the gentle ones have to say, look, you're going to have to do this if that's the state of the class. You might want that. You can tell the kids you want that. But if that's the state, that's where you have to be. Okay. But hopefully, if there's enough of us going, oh, we'd like to have that state, and if this works, which it did for me, it means that the students also like A state because there's more activity, there's more relationship, and it just works just a lot more efficiently in a human kind of way. Not efficient like a machine, efficient as in human. Okay, it also gets amazing results. With the ABC state, the reason why I did it, I should have mentioned it in the previous introduction, I managed to get students, I witnessed incredible behaviours. Okay, and one example was I managed to participate with a class, and in a short period of time we did 25 weeks work in 5, and at the end of that we had an exam, and those students, 21 of them moved up a set because they're based on the results, and 3 moved up 2 sets. We did funny experiments after that, where I had them for another 2 weeks, I think it is. We did activities and games. I had groups doing presentations of material that they'd studied that lesson, and the one presented, I remember this one group did a barber's quartet. I mean, we're talking about 13, 14-year-olds, middle set, of an inner city London school, and they did a barber's quartet, kind of like guys on the side, on their knees, other people, and that's how they concluded their presentation. I mean, the rest of the kids in the class applauded. When you get applause, okay, spontaneous applause or spontaneous behaviours, you can't really teach, but if you get spontaneous behaviours, they come out of A classes. Okay, you can't expect spontaneous behaviours in C classes. You don't expect that because part of the expectations are you do this, you do that. You don't expect spontaneous. Spontaneous has been kind of removed. Whereas A classes, you get spontaneous. Spontaneous behavior, spontaneous thoughts, new thoughts. Everything that I've developed has basically been because students, I've participated with students, and I've learned how to engage a bunch of people in A states. My disaster has been most adults are still operating in C state, okay? Where there's authority, positions, and roles, and organizations, and boundaries, and all this kind of stuff. Whereas if it's A, it's just a bunch of us in a room. How do we organize this? Right. So this is a more rigorous way of going through this. What is low-level disruption? Well, low-level disruption is basically a problem. It's a problem in behavior because you get your intentional oppositional state behavior, which is aggressive and so on and so forth, very obvious and direct, but then you get this thing called low-level disruption. Low-level disruption, as reported by Ofsted in Below the Radar in 2014, is pupils are potentially losing up to an hour of learning each day because of disruption in classrooms. An hour a day. Okay. That means in every lesson, I don't know, 20%? Like people talking, chatting. Well, what is it? Well, we're talking about, for example, this is from Big Question, NASU last year, well, 2019, low-level disruption, chatting, not following instructions, reluctance to start work. I.e., teachers spending time going, Tom, get on with it, blah, 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 and that's how you start your lesson. Blah, 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 get on with it, right, and then, you have to go around telling people what to do. That's tedious. And what is the consequences of low-level disruption? Detrimental effect on student learning. It basically just eats into people's time, distraction. It's a kind of quality in the class. It's not as fine. Impoverishes student-teacher relationship because basically instead of inspiring somebody to be interested in the work, you're kind of nagging them, and so that deteriorates the relationship. And contributes to professional erosion. Basically, if teachers are spending a lot of their time just making sure people are getting on with it and conjuring the same social disorder lesson after lesson after lesson, after a few years, it is deadening. Okay, and depending on the level of disruption. Okay, low level, and then there's kind of reasonable amounts of low level disruption. There are a third of the teachers accepted. Now here's the problem, it's a little hint here, Ofsted 2014. A third of teachers accepted as part of teaching, whereas nearly half said they did not. Now why is that? It's because there's a blurred line between genuine social learning, okay, where the students are becoming aware of themselves. Remember, we're talking about adolescence, you remember. I mean, it's been a long time for me, but you remember, when you're an adolescent, you're like, wait, what's going on? And you become more self-aware and therefore self-conscious, and people are more like objects. It's based on the gender thing. The hormones and sexualization start to appear from, I don't know, 11-year-olds all the way up to 16, 18. All right, people are kind of becoming more and more aware, and people are objects, and I'm an object, and and how do we deal with that? That's what's happening with students, and so they're learning how to place themselves. And then they start to recognize they're not their parents. They're not comedy. They're like a separate being with their own choices, and so with their own choice of clothes and how they present themselves and their words and what they want to do. Okay, how well they want to be considered to be a student, how they're, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's a lot of complexity, which C class flattens out. Just says, right, here we go. We're just going to learn this. Whereas B and A is slightly more flexible and says, look, we're human beings and we are growing. And yes, people are making mistakes, but it's okay. Help each other out, we're fine. A just means, wow, we're doing really well. So this blurred line between social learning, where it's genuine social learning, that's what B state is, there's no antagonism involved. And if you actually look at it, what are they? Chatting? Well, that's social. The idea is you want to chat about something. It's usually about something which is so much more interesting than whatever it is that's being presented in class. I mean, think about it. I mean, something's happened with some friends just before the lesson starts. It's like, oh, that's real. And somebody's, relationships and love and then it's class and it's like, here's a triangle, hypotenuse, blah, blah. It's like, and therefore it requires self-discipline for the student to go right. And I tell this to kids because, and this is a positive thing. This is not me telling them off. This is like, look, we can't compete with that. Hypotenuse, and triangle, and ABC, it's just not going to compete with love, and relationships and things like that. or what you saw on television, or the computer games that you've played for hours and hours and hours last night, and that you're going to play hours and hours and hours later. Okay, you can't compete. We can't compete with those. Okay, so you have to have self-discipline and say, right, out of your mind, just don't pay attention to those things. So when they pop to you, I go, no, 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 no. You have to focus on this. That's the self-discipline. Focus. Okay. So, and kids know this. They know this. They know that these things are kind of like impinging upon them, and these relationships, they kind of know that they're going to grow and then they're going to disappear off, or the game is going to be replaced with another game. So it's like an obsession. And whereas this stuff and the exams they're going to do, the qualifications, are they going to become a musician? Are they going to become, a engineer? Are they going to become whatever it is? Well, learn the stuff and find out if you're actually, one, you enjoy it, two, you're good at it. All right, there are career paths up ahead. There's a whole world up ahead. So that's what adults are good at, seeing up ahead and trying to provide students with that, the skills. So the social learning is occurring, okay, about themselves, and they have to learn how to be able to moderate that amongst themselves. And then this on-purposely disciplining. It's not on purpose. The low-level disruption is not intentional, but it gets tracked and caught and called. Actually, I'm jumping the gun here and saying, okay, I'm going to jump the gun. It gets treated as if it is disruption. And it's not. It's social learning. Okay, they're just chatting. But the consequence of chatting is it does disrupt. Okay, but it is social learning. There's something going on there, but what's the learning? Well, it's to do with wanting to socialize. The relationships, yeah, I know, but in relation to the maths, in relation to whatever we're learning, it's not really relevant. And that's why that specific chat about maths, fantastic. Chat about, the history thing, fantastic. Chat about absolutely anything related to the topic that we're doing, fantastic. And what are the other ones? Following instructions. There's less. Yeah, following instructions, not because of this, imposing. It's because we can't get on and do things that are more interesting if we don't play the game. Playing football, you pick up the ball, you run with it, you're like, football. Football. There's a clue. Come on, guys, let's go. Don't pick up the ball. That's only the goalkeepers. Remember that? Remember the rules? Oh, yeah, I remember the rules. That's a beast. I forgot. You can see small kids trying to learn football and they pick up the ball and you're like, they're only like 4, so they're going to make mistakes, all right? Similarly, about self-organizing, a lot of people start going into its control and they stop following instructions. It's like, only if you're imposing this do they think. They make the mistake that it's an instruction. Let's all work together, let's all do this exercise. That's not instruction. That's like, in order to be able to learn whatever we have to do, you have to do this. But we're concentrating, focusing it, 20 minutes so we can all do it, means that we can do something slightly more entertaining. So, swallow the pill. Eat your peas. You have to do, clean the toilets. We have to do the things that need to be done, right? And then there are other things that are slightly more enjoyable. And in fact, we might be able to find slightly more enjoyable things that don't require sometimes, or require less drill. Okay, drills and that kind of lesson are minimal, required for technique. But there's a lot of other stuff to do with thinking and social communication, a lot more accessible through other activities, a lot more accessible. And reluctance to start work. Well, that's because there's not enough activities, basically, interesting, exciting activities. That's what all new teachers are told. Engage the students with good things. In fact, there are 4 major. I'll try to stick to this sequence. There are 4 primary means of countering the problem, following the punitive consequence procedure of a school's discipline policy. Okay, basically C-state. So you've got low-level disruption, which we've understood. Okay. I jumped the gun on its head. It's actually just social stuff mostly, and a misinterpretation of control, and then it's reinforced basically by the consequence system. So the more you do the consequence system, the more that the student tries to avoid and it thinks it's instructions. That is a form of control. Okay, it's not about the learning and their future thing, and that's what you're trying to do. It's the fact that you're telling them to do something, and they're like reluctant about doing that because they think it's an instruction. Okay. Do you see? And so then when the teacher puts in the consequence, that the consequence procedure is definitely an instruction, because that's the instruction that adults got from government, okay, from the head, and they have to do this, okay, because it is, and it does work. Sometimes an external form of control does help, of course. But if that's mixed up with learning this thing to go forwards, that's the confusion. So it's definitely following the punitive consequence procedure is one way of dealing with any form of disorder, all right? But maybe not appropriate for low-level disruption. The cultivation of teacher soft skills to foster a positive student-teacher relationship, absolutely. But that's a lot harder to develop. The consequence system is quite easy to follow, although actually you'll find it's a bit tricky in combination with the others, because the second one is develop a soft relationship. So quite often, I mean, I remember my PGCs, like if it's a low-level thing way off there, don't pay attention to it. Because by drawing attention to it, it'll exacerbate it and blows it out of proportion. So you don't address it like it was a whole class, so you kind of go round and you say, could you just, and you just talk about it gently, you address it to the person, and then you leave. Okay, you're just mentioning it and then you leave, and then you hope that corrects. And if it doesn't, then you have to maybe do something a bit more vocal or more socially visible. And those are soft skills. Okay, and then the soft, no, that's not quite a soft skill, that's still kind of C class. A soft skill is just saying hello to people, being genuinely interested in people. Soft skills, that's why they're called soft skills. They're, trickier to be able to determine. And how do you teach people? So it says cultivating soft skills, cultivation, nurturing soft skills amongst the teachers. And I suspect that most of the teachers that have got some soft skills, they already have them. That's what the students are responding to. But if you do this for long enough in the job and the imposition of this, those soft skills can get a little bit tricky. Okay, you might get a nice combination with the imposition of discipline, and you've got that right combination, and professionals that do that well, fine. Okay. However, one is the discipline, the other one is the soft skills. Okay, so it's like, and how do you teach that? How do you train that? You can train people to do the discipline policy and imposition quite well. I've seen that, and a lot of academies are doing that. But how do you develop soft skills? And do you have to have courses in it? And it's quite difficult to do. I'm blowing my own horn here, but that's the whole point of the A and B classes, that people get an opportunity to practice those and learn those. And so whenever you do any kind of training of staff, which is more like that, it's more like opportunities to learn and practice these activities, these ways of dealing with things. Soft skills are a lot harder, as we know. Okay. Cultivation. Third one is direct teaching of social skills to students to prevent problems from arising. Okay, this is America's led on this one. So students that are having difficulties, you actually literally teach them ways to mindfulness, for example, to be aware of what's happening inside them so they don't get triggered by certain events that happen, to modulate how it is that they talk, to not be so forthright with their opinion, to consider verbalizing before acting, all these kinds of things. So direct teaching of people to engage other human beings appropriately. That's a lot of labour, takes a lot of focus, and usually one-to-one attention. Whole class teaching of this is a bit trickier. But we can learn if the ambience is more appropriate. And providing engaging lessons. Discipline policy can be taught, and the providing engaging lessons is the primary way that PGCs are run. Okay, basically engage the students with interesting activities. However, what I found when I went into schools is that I had these fantastic activities, but if the kids, for whatever reason, weren't playing ball, it's like giving them cake. And if for whatever reason they didn't really want cake, need cake, they'd already had some cake, they just like started throwing it around. So you have to earn it. You have to earn it, and not through you earn it through some kind of intermediary of authority, something, and now you deserve it. No, you earn it because the social grouping is appropriate, that they can eat the cake. You can give them an interesting activity, and they can actually operate it. Group work. Group work is A, B. You can't really do group work in C. If you do, it's exhausting doing group work in C classes. It can be done, of course it can, done very rigorously and controlled, all right? But because of kids and level of disorder and the social learning, it means that's where all the collaborative skills are being learned. And if you're doing it like a military thing, then you're not really learning those skills. So it's self-defeating. But in a way. But if we're interested in the soft skills, we kind of have to provide people with the group work, and they're learning about individuals and collaboration and so on and so forth. And there should be a period, a week or something, where they can reflect on and talk about how they behaved in different groups and what worked and didn't work. Okay, that's what social learning should be. Whatever it's called, I can't remember what it's called. It's got a whole bunch of initials. Social and psychological health lesson. And it shouldn't be about something, it should be reflecting on the experience that they've had that week and maybe what they're going to do next week. In their actual experience, when this happened, that happened, and blah, 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 and and the people with more social intelligence will be able to explain to other students of their peers, basically, why certain things happened, why they didn't, and maybe try different things out. And it's much easier to learn something from peers than it is from an adult who's got some kind of hierarchy structure of everything else going on. Right? You might pay attention to the adult if they've developed and they've demonstrated the soft skills, just like they've got the social intelligence. So when they say things, people listen to them because the people who are socially intelligent will listen to them because they understand it's the same kind of language. All right? But somebody who doesn't have those social skills will find it easier to listen to a peer who's got the social skills than an adult because, well, something about imposition of control, and they're getting that confused because they don't have the social intelligence. Do you see? Do you see the problems? It's a nightmare, okay? It's a nightmare systemically. So even though we've got this kind of forced separation of techniques, the only structure we've got is effectively imposition of control, the discipline policy, and expectations. And, it would be nice if we had relationships. Oh, that would be good. But institutional forms, they talk about expectations, reactive procedures, or consequences. There's a whole bunch of names there. Sanctions dictated by government, fine. Sqale's culture ranges from zero tolerance, as I've mentioned, to much more community-based relationships. Variability, quite high variability between teachers in different classes. The problem is that each teacher, unless you have a whole school policy and a whole school culture, okay, and a lot of head teachers are introducing whole school policies, okay, to make sure that everybody's got the same system. And this has been a goal that nearly all organizations have still, that schools have. They're kind of like a little bit behind how organizations are working. They think that if all the teachers behave in this way, then we're going to have a whole school culture. And it's like, no, the whole point about having a culture is that you have variety and diversity. So you get different people having their different interests in the different subjects, but also having different personalities. And how they exercise that regarding the discipline policy, that's what they think is going to be a whole school culture. Whereas if we want increased diversity, we need to get up to A stage so that every individual can be accepted for the individual they are, regarding their psychology and the gender and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. Much easier to get in an A state than in a C state. We're going to impose it so that if somebody says, in a C state, for example, class, if somebody says something which is incorrect, racist or sexist or ageist, okay, says something, the teacher will probably stamp it, okay? And then the students will then appeal to the teacher's stamping. And that is not the way to do it. Okay, so if a kid is sitting there with a gender thing, or me, for example, I had racial problems at school, the teacher was expected to do these things, whereas I think it's my responsibility that if something's happening that I think, wait a minute, that's a bit off, I should be in a school, in a class, where I can draw attention to that in an appropriate way and be reinforced by the teacher, fine, okay, because that's fine, but not substituting for my power as a student. The teacher substitutes the power of the students, and this should not happen. Okay, for A and B, we want people to find their power amongst each other and to engender the sensitivity that lies behind, the imposition of we don't want to have, racism or these and other things. But to ask institutions to impose upon that, I think, well, look at the world. I don't think it works. It works to some extent, obviously, but changing the actual structures to make sure there's equality. But once you've kind of got those structures and it's still to do with human beings engaging each other and making sure, are they doing it because we've got to have, 3 white people or black people, or we have got women, or we've got to have certain young people, we've got a certain quota, okay, right. So they're looking at a person today, they've only got these people, okay, well, this person's going to get the job because they need to fill the quota. It's like, no, please, right. So it's more to do with, yes, we've got the structures to make sure that the structures are not biased, but to actually get the people to be not biased needs to be learned personally, by friendships, by engagements, by trusting people, and then fulfilling it. The women can do certain jobs that men can do, and men can do jobs some that women can do, and black and white, pink and green, and whatever we are, and gender interests, and so on and so forth, because we're engaging people with lots of variety of cultures and everything else, and it works. We can actually still get the job done, or we can actually get a better job done, even better, with different cultural perspectives and different perspectives. Right, sorry, I keep on jumping into the solution. I should just stick to the problem. What academics like is, let's delineate the problem ad nauseum. Others argue the majority of behaviour management policies are likely to succeed in their stated aims because the consequential moral philosophy. Okay, basically this consequence procedure. I just demonstrated one just now about the disempowerment of students. Right, we don't have time to go into that. Right, expectations, soft skills, emotional intelligence, social skills, soften the hierarchy, humanize education, beautiful notions, and it can be done. And it's all to do with warm relationships, reduces bullying, builds positive classroom environments, increases academic input. Fantastic. Philosophically, we've got support for that to create genuine relationships, the internally persuasive discourse, that's Bakhtin, reflexive contract, okay, with the students. We're doing this together, we're learning together. I will learn, you will learn, we will learn together. The social and emotional learning agenda, you see that's again trying to do it from impose a form of learning or instruction. It's like, I don't know, I think it has to be grown. I don't think you can kind of just teach this stuff. I think it has to be brought out. Okay, that's an A. We're in A state. Right, and teaching students directly social skills is questionable results. Lots of other behaviour influencing systems proven success. Good behaviour game. That's mostly generated from primary school. Done in secondary school, but it's to do with rewards. And I think the reward A state classes is the reward. If they manage to maintain an A state, it means you can give them lots of activities, and the activities themselves are why it's an A state. It's a self-fulfilling positive cycle. Okay, it's not an artificial reward. It might sound like it. If you do this well, you get to be able to do this other activity. But the activity itself is also a learning activity. So that's actually part of the whole thing. Okay, it's just a higher, richer, like puzzles and games are just richer in terms of the learning that's in there. To sit there and persist with a problem, to acknowledge that there's a problem, to enjoy there's a problem, to work out, is a phenomenal learning task. And what most of the schools lessons is trying to minimize the problem so that it's like small pieces. They don't actually enjoy solving it because they know the teacher's got the solution, so it's just learning a small thing. But to hunt for something that's genuinely a puzzle, the fun is in the puzzle. And then to get the answer is like, great. And not just to go, here's some answers. It's like, wow. And that's, once you start getting into that, once you start getting that aspect of it, in terms of maths, that's what you want. So the person goes, I understand what algebra is. It's hunting for the answer. And as soon as you have that, it's like, wow, this is like a massive, fast race. It's super exciting. That's what I found with the kids. Positive futures, aspire, positive behaviour support. So there are lots of solutions to deal with disruption and even low-level disruption. But as far as I can tell, they all involve significant organisational overheads. You have to train people to do this. And then once they train the people to do these things, and then there's a lot of buy-in, all right, even with the students. Whereas this, I tell, A, B, C, describe it in less than a couple of minutes, and we're off. And it's just an ongoing process, and the learning skills are happening simultaneously, and the teachers that have got a bit more social intelligence will be able to explicate more of this, so give a bit more self-reflection, and the students themselves have this capacity to understand what's going on, and therefore there's this language, and it's very simple. It's very, very, very simple. But it's a beautiful thing because it relates the individual to the collective. That's the trick about this. That's why this is interesting. Right, and there was another thing. I actually tried one of these things, learning contracts. I remember doing that even in my first year while I was doing my PGCE, and it worked. Got the students, do you agree with these things? I think I created it actually. And we went through the steps, and then they signed it. And they were doing GCSE. They were doing that year. They were 16. They were doing exams like at the end of me teaching them. So, which is unusual for a PGCE student. But it worked well. Okay, so it's good, but it can be another form of structural violence. Okay, it's like you create a thing, and then the kids kind of sign, and they're like, "I'm signing this thing, but I don't know. I'm not convinced by this." And if you have it like that, it's another form of. Whereas this ABC, it's not a thing that you sign. It's just a state. It's just the emergent state, and if we get up there, fantastic. All right. Right. So. The basic problem is that in our schools we have this has been defined. C state consequence system is easily strictly defined. Just pause this.